Have you ever heard of pumped hydro energy storage? Well, it's one of the oldest forms of energy storage still in use today. Soon, a large pumped hydro project will break ground near the Columbia River. If and when it gets built, it could help the Northwest get closer to those lofty clean energy goals that we're approaching in the coming decades. But the project has some major opposition, primarily from tribes in the area who say the project would destroy several sites that they hold sacred. Environmental reporter Kil Williams talked to the company working to move the project forward and to the people who are dead set on stopping it.
The Columbia River is, as my aunt would say, is the veins of Mother Earth, and it's like us, we have veins in the blood of who we are and the blood of Mother Earth here.
This is a very important food gathering area for the Yakamas, and it's where some of our first foods come in the spring.
Jeremy Takala and Elaine Harvey are both citizens of Yakama Nation, made up of 14 bands and tribes from all over eastern Washington. And this stretch of the Columbia, near the John Day Dam, it holds special importance to them.
10 to 15 miles this way, there's an existing longhouse where we have many different ceremonies, including first fruit ceremonies, which also consist of gathering foods at this location.
In 1855, the tribes of Yakama Nation relinquished much of their ancestral homeland to the U.S. government. But they retained rights to hunt, gather foods, and fish on what is now known as ceded lands, which cover much of eastern Washington. The land, and their use of it, remains an integral part of their identity.
Every year we honor our foods when they come around within our home. And many of our elders, the adults, the children partake and still continue on that way of life. So with the project being proposed here, it will definitely impact our life.
The project he's referring to is the Goldendale Pumped Hydro Storage Project.
Pumped hydro storage is the oldest form. It's also the most used form of energy storage in the U.S.
That's Eric Steinley with Rye Development, the company hoping to build the project. Pumped hydro storage works like this. There are two reservoirs, one down by the river and another 2,000 feet above on the bluff overlooking the gorge. Connecting the two, there's a 30-foot diameter tunnel running through the mountain with a turbine inside. Water is pumped into the top reservoir, then released through the tunnel, spinning the turbine and generating electricity. And pumped hydro can solve one of the biggest problems with wind and solar energy. Those systems work great when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, but those times they don't always line up with when people need their power the most. Pumped hydro can fill in those gaps.
During periods of time when we need electricity, but the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing, we just release that water and we have on-demand carbon-free electricity.
Energy storage will be increasingly important as Oregon and Washington move toward ambitious clean energy goals. Steinley said the region will need an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 megawatts of energy storage to fully meet those goals. The Goldendale project, it could provide around 1,200 of those megawatts, enough to power the city of Seattle for up to 12 hours.
So for the states of Oregon and Washington, they're seeing these big needs for energy storage right around 2030.
Yep.
And so this project is set up to align with those goals.
And unlike battery storage, pumped hydro doesn't require lithium mining, and it has a much longer life than batteries, which can be difficult to dispose of. But for all the problems pumped hydro can solve, it creates just as many for the citizens of Yakama Nation. Problems that feel all too familiar.
This area between the basalt bastions of the gorge.
This just feels like we are going through the times of when the dams were constructed and when the government decided they're going to do this, and they did it, no matter what the impacts to the tribes were.
Harvey's ancestral village was destroyed when the dams went up on the Columbia River. And one of the most productive fishing sites, Celilo Falls, was inundated. And Takala sees parallels between those energy projects and the one being proposed here, at the site of a former aluminum smelting plant.
I hear elders say enough is enough. We've had a smelter plant here, and it's in need of a cleanup. You have the hydro system right next door, and we've already seen the impacts of it. Historically, it traumatized their people.
The pumped hydro project, which would include two 60-acre reservoirs and a 3,000-foot-long tunnel through the mountain, would be on or near several sacred sites to the Yakama Nation, some of which are eligible for the National Registry of Historic Places. One of those is Juniper Point, called Pushpum, in the Yakama language.
It's just like any other cathedral, a church, or a capital, that's very important to, our citizens of this country.
They want to drill a 30-foot tunnel with the powerhouse in it in our sacred site. That's a total desecration of our sacred site.
One thing I can say is
Steinle said his company has tried to do all they can to lessen the impacts of the project. They picked the site because it was already developed, home to a wind farm. They moved the location of the upper reservoir down from the ridgetop, and they're working to provide access to the tribes once construction is complete.
part of what we can do is continue to have that conversation and provide access to traditional gathering and other types of activities.
But Takala and Harvey, they aren't interested in lessening the impact to a place they hold sacred.
And there's no mitigation out, that could replace any of the archaeological sites, that can replace the traditional cultural properties, or, just our sacred mountain in general.
And they aren't interested in negotiating with a private developer either. Instead, they've sent letters to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which would grant final approval for the project, asking for direct negotiations with the government.
We are not a public stakeholder. We are a sovereign nation.
Takala said the tribes haven't gotten a response, so I emailed the commission myself, and I also didn't hear back. Steinle, he said the concerns of the tribe are not completely unfounded.
We understand that this area is significant. That it doesn't matter so much that it's private land or that it's fully developed, that there's still significance to the site.
But assuming, all the permits go through, everything is approved, if the tribes are still opposed to this, I'm assuming that the project will move forward.
Under certain conditions, yes.
If that's the case, Harvey said it would feel like another link in a chain of infrastructure projects that have either downplayed or ignored the concerns of the people who have lived here the longest.
At a personal level, it's really heartbreaking. And, I think about our ancestors who had to deal with the dams being built. They had to deal with highways and railroads being constructed. This is another, it's like another wave.
And Cale Williams joins me in studio now. So is there a timeline for these potential approvals and construction? I mean, how far along is the project?
Yeah, so pretty far along in terms of the permits. They got their last state permit that they needed from the state of Washington, the water quality permit, earlier this year. Now they need to get permits from the feds, as the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They're going to issue their final environmental impact statement later this year that will look at all the impacts to fish and wildlife, animals, and these culturally important sites. From there, they get their final certificate of operation and construction, which will last for 50 years.
Wow.
Early next year, if this all goes through.
Okay, we'll see what happens with that. Kind of curious, did the company look at other sites that maybe, weren't so sacred to the tribes? Or if so, why was this one the best selection?
I mean, there are a lot of unique attributes to this site, aside from all the concerns of the folks at the Yakama Nation. I mean, you need a place where you can build two reservoirs with a great deal of elevation between them near a water source. On top of all that, this site also sits right along a northwest corridor of transmission lines, so they wouldn't have to build any new roads. They wouldn't have to build any new transmission lines, and both of these sites are already developed. And they said that they've been looking at this site for decades to do just this kind of project, so they're not really looking anywhere else.
Right, so on paper for the company, it looks good. I'm curious if for the tribes, do they have any recourse aside from what they've already done, though?
That remains to be seen. I mean, they have told me explicitly that they do not want to negotiate with this company. They see this as a nation-to-nation kind of negotiation between Yakama Nation and the U.S. government. So they've sent letters to FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They have not heard back. But I think what's really important to get at here is kind of this perspective that the tribe looks at this land. First, the perspective of the developers. Jeremy Takala told me developers come in and they see, the mountains and the canyons and the river, and they think, what can we do with this land? What can it do for us?
Right.
And when the tribes look at these same features, the mountain, the rivers, the canyons, they see them as doing what they're supposed to be doing.
How do we preserve them?
Exactly, and unless the federal government comes around to that perspective, I think that it's a long shot that the tribes are going to be able to stop this.
All right, well, keep us posted on the project timeline, Cale. Thank you.